100 years later, Scott was competing in a cycling race, but just as she passed a small tree, she took a tumble, giving her head a not-so-friendly Her teammates rushed her to hospital. Doctors found no major issue, to everyone's relief. But why wasn't she awake? It was puzzling. Meanwhile, Lixi waited in line at City Hospital and looked up. And suddenly her heart started doing a little dance, while the colonel nearby seemed to pick up on the vibe. Even though this was their first meeting, a single glance had them feeling like they'd met before, a true rom-com moment. Colonel was not about to let this chance slip away, so she patiently waited at the door for Lixi, and then orchestrated a clever meet-cute as Lixi stepped out. Lixi didn't immediately agree, but when the colonel gallantly extended her arm, Lixi instinctively linked up like it was all part of the plan. After arriving at the cafe, they dove into this sense of familiarity like old pals, saying, "I can totally relate to you." It was just a meet-cute, yet their hearts kind of understood each other. Soon, Lixi and the colonel dived into a romantic date, both feeling the colonel was not only funny, but also found Lix's poetic flair impressive. Lixi thought this deep conversation felt oddly familiar, like when she was penning. Of course, she didn't forget to share her story with Scott, but oddly enough, her sister had stashed it in the secret compartment, and no response. As time went by, Lixi and the colonel's connection grew deeper, but then news from the front line suddenly hit like a train. So, the night before returning to duty, the colonel specifically asked Lixi to meet. She snuck out of the house to the wooden bridge, and they found themselves locked in a magic. The moonlight was soft and gentle, much like their affections, intertwining in the shadows, leading to an irresistible kiss witnessed by the night sky. The next day, Lixi went to the station to see the colonel off, with sunset casting a filter on their faces. The colonel made a heartfelt promise to return after the war to marry her, and with an emotional goodbye kiss, Lixi watched her board the train, filled with Astonishingly, Scott seemed to have a sixth sense, and suddenly woke up. The first thing he did was open the antique desk's hidden compartment, finding it stuffed. After reading, he grasped Lixi and the colonel's tale, felt happy for them, but an uneasy feeling arose when seeing the colonel off to war. In a rush, he jumped online to search for the colonel's unit info, but the results were far from cheery, coldly noting that the colonel had died in the battle on July 3rd was the date, and cross-referencing with the letters, Scott realized the colonel would die in 2 days. He hurried off to send a letter. He hoped Lixi could deter the colonel from going to the front, but when he rushed to the post office, he found the century-old place was in flames. Officers were still maintaining order around, but Scott knew if he didn't get the letter out fast, Lixi would receive some unfortunate news. So in a moment of urgency, he snuck in through the back door like a ninja, and just as the mailbox was about to be devoured by flames, Scott slipped. After that, everything was in fate's hands. Meanwhile, Lixi returned home, feeling like a deflated balloon, fretting over the colonel's safety. Just then, the Duke made a surprise visit, and her father insisted she go on a date with him, despite Lixi's internal protests. As she was about to spill the beans about the colonel, Scott's letter arrived at the perfect time, and upon reading it, Lixi called for her sister to grab her luggage. She rushed to the front line to stop the colonel and pleaded with the Duke to take her to the station, but he just shrugged innocently. Her father forbade her going out, but now nothing could stop Lixi. She rushed to the station by carriage, only to find the front line train grounded. Left with no choice, Lixi bought a ticket for part of the journey, but soon found she still had quite a trek ahead. She begged the coachman for a lift. Offering her entire stash of cash, she faced nothing but polite refusals. Understandably, no one was keen on heading to the front during wartime, but time was ticking and opportunities were fading away. After what felt like forever, a brave coachman agreed to risk it all to take her. After an exhausting night of travel, she finally reached the aid station, clutching onto the hope for dear life. Following soldiers' directions, she searched and found the colonel near death. The promise echoed again. She realized this promise was destined to be broken. The colonel tenderly wiped away her tears, but Lixi was unable to change the course of destiny. Meanwhile, Scott jolted awake from a dream, as if had been through a time-bending loop. When he got home, Lixi tiptoed back to her room, heartbroken, writing a letter to Scott to pour out her feelings about failing to stop the colonel. While Scott yearned to comfort her, the post office had been reduced to ashes, leaving him powerless. After listening to Scott's words, his mom advised him to face reality, especially since his engagement was looming, but Scott avoided answering her questions head-on. His fiancée laid everything bare, but after reading the letters, she suspected Scott was spinning tall tales. At that moment, the hidden compartment under her watchful eye, Scott opened the compartment and discovered a new letter from Lixi, along with a photo of her and the Colonel. To their great surprise, the Colonel turned out to look exactly like Scott. The atmosphere instantly buzzed with intense intrigue. After losing the Colonel, Lixi spiraled into a funk, writing loads of letters hoping for a reply, but Scott just kept ghosting her. At her wit's end, Lixi burned all letters to end her happy past. Just then, her girlfriend saw a letter under the table. That late comfort showed up just in time, and Lixi finally saw the photo Scott sent, realizing just how much Scott and the Colonel resembled each other. She realized no encounter in life was coincidental. Then, she hid her photo with the Colonel, as Scott confessed to his fiancée. Scott's fiancée stared at the picture, a mix of emotions swelling within her as if she had become an outsider. Seeing her on the edge of a breakdown, Scott decided it was time to lay everything bare. She was aware that without love, it would merely cause them even greater pain and torment. Ultimately, the fiancée decided to release her hold, bestowed a farewell kiss, and then walked straight away, leaving Scott standing there, completely stupefied. Time slips away before you know it. When Scott returned to the estate, the welcoming African-American maid ushered him inside. Sadly, the kind old lady has died, but when Scott re-enters Lix's room, it's as if he transcends time to see scenes from a century ago. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to this fantastic video.